At 14:23 on the afternoon of July 18, 1944, Private First Class Emile Corteil sat behind a 57mm anti-tank gun on the western edge of Hill 112, 3 kilometers south of Caen, France. The sky was white, no clouds, no wind. The wheat fields below had been burned flat 2 days prior. Smoke still rose from the farmhouses along the Odon River. His gun was British, not American. The M1 57mm had been requisitioned from a destroyed British battery 4 days earlier, after the original American crews were killed in the opening bombardment. It fired solid shot, not high explosive. The traverse wheel stuck at 15 degrees left. The breech block had been replaced with a part from a different model and required 2 men to close properly. Captain Morris had called it a museum piece. He told Corteil to hold the position for 90 seconds if Germans appeared, then fall back to the secondary line 400 meters east. Corteil was 22 years old. He had never fired the gun in combat. Emile Corteil was born in Lewiston, Maine in 1922. His father operated a textile loom. Emile worked the same loom from age 14 until his draft notice in February in 1943. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 131 pounds at induction. His file listed him as proficient with machinery, but noted poor eyesight in his left eye. He wore wireframe glasses. They were not military issue. During basic training at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, his drill instructor removed him from rifle qualification after he scored 41 out of a possible 200 points. He was reassigned to logistics. He loaded trucks for 9 months. In April 1944, his unit was douane of personnel after losses in Italy. He was transferred to the 743rd Tank Battalion as an anti-tank gunner because the position required a loader, not a marksman. His crewmates were Corporal Vincent Haas, a coal miner from Pennsylvania, and Private Lionel Ruiz, a mechanic from El Paso. Haas called Corteil the librarian. Ruiz asked him twice if he knew how to load the gun under fire. Corteil did not answer. The 57mm M1 anti-tank gun weighed 2,800 pounds in firing position. It had a rifled barrel 49 inches long. It fired a 6.28-pound armor-piercing shot at 2,800 feet per second. Maximum effective range against armor was 1,000 yards. Beyond that, penetration dropped below 60 millimeters. German Panzer IVs carried 80 millimeters of frontal armor. Panthers carried 120. The M1 could penetrate a Panzer IV from the front at 600 yards if the shot struck flat. It could not penetrate a Panther from any angle beyond 400 yards. British crews called it inadequate. American crews called it proof the army didn't care if they lived. The gun Corteil inherited had fired 114 rounds before its original crew was killed. The barrel was worn, the sights were calibrated in meters, not yards. The gun shield had a hole the size of a fist on the left side where a German shell fragment had passed through and killed the previous gunner. Hill 112 had changed hands 11 times in the previous 9 days. British forces took it on July 10th. Germans retook it on July 11th. Americans moved into positions on the western slope on July 16th after British units withdrew north. The hill itself was not tactically significant. It was 112 meters above sea level. From the crest, observers could see the Odon River Valley, the village of Malto, and the approaches to Caen. German commanders wanted it for observation. Allied commanders wanted it to deny observation. Neither side fortified it properly. Both sides bled for it daily. On the morning of July 18, the 2nd Panzer Division launched a counterattack from Malto with the objective of retaking the hill and pushing American forces back across the Odon. Intelligence reported 12 Panzer IVs, 6 Panthers, and an estimated 400 infantry. American forces on Hill 112 numbered approximately 180 men, 6 anti-tank guns, and no armor support. Tank destroyers were committed to the northern sector. Requests for artillery were denied. The guns were needed for the breakout at St. Lo. Captain Morris told his officers the position would hold for 4 hours, then withdraw. No one expected longer. At 1350, German artillery began ranging fire on the eastern slope of Hill 112. The first shells landed 200 meters beyond the American positions. Forward observers called corrections. The second salvo landed on the crest. The third salvo walked down the western slope. Corteil and his crew crouched behind the gun shield. The bombardment lasted 18 minutes. Corteil counted the seconds between impacts. He reached 347. When the shelling stopped, Haas looked over the shield and saw movement in the tree line 800 meters west. He said nothing for 11 seconds. Then he said the Panzers were coming. Corteil stood and looked through the sight. The tree line was dark. The fields were pale yellow. He saw dust rising in 3 places. He adjusted the sight picture and saw the lead tank emerge from the trees. It was a Panzer IV. The hull was dark grey, the tracks through dirt in steady plumes. A second tank appeared 30 meters to the right. A third appeared behind the first. Haas counted 6. Ruiz loaded a round and closed the breech. It took him 4 tries. Corteil asked the range. Haas said 800 meters and dropping. Corteil did not fire. The manual said to wait until 600 meters. At 600 meters, the lead tank stopped. The turret traversed left. Corteil realized it was ranging on his position. He did not move. The tank fired. The shell passed over the gun and impacted 15 meters behind them. Dirt rained onto the shield. Haas said they should leave. Corteil said to wait. At 14:11, the lead Panzer IV resumed its advance. The other 5 followed in a staggered line. They moved at 12 kilometers per hour. The infantry had not appeared yet. Corteil watched the lead tank close to 550 meters. He aligned the sight on the glacis plate below the turret. He told Ruiz to load. Ruiz said the round was already loaded. Corteil said to confirm. Ruiz confirmed. Corteil placed his hand on the trigger lever and watched the tank drive into the crosshair. At 520 meters, he fired.
The gun recoiled 31 inches. The shot struck the Panzer IV on the lower hull just above the right track. The impact made no sound Corteil could hear over the ringing in his ears. The tank did not stop. It turned 7 degrees right and continued forward. Corteil said he missed. Haas said he hit it but did nothing. Ruiz loaded another round. Corteil adjusted his sight picture and led the tank by 2 meters. He fired again. The second shot struck the turret ring. The tank stopped. Smoke came from the engine deck. The hatch opened. Corteil did not watch the crew. He traversed right to the second tank. The second Panzer IV was 480 meters out and moving at an angle. Corteil aimed for the center of mass. He fired. The shot struck low and ricocheted off the front glacis. The tank stopped and began to reverse. Corteil told Ruiz to load faster. Ruiz said he was loading as fast as the breech would close. Corteil waited for the tank to clear his sight line. It did not. The tank fired. The shell hit the ground 6 meters in front of the gun and sprayed dirt across the shield. Corteil fired into the dust. He did not see the impact. When the dust cleared, the tank was burning. Haas said that was 2. Corteil said to count later. The remaining 4 tanks spread into a wider line. They stopped advancing and began firing from range. Shells landed around the position in steady intervals. One struck 12 meters left, another struck 9 meters right. Corteil could not return fire while they remained stationary beyond 500 meters. He waited. The tanks did not move for 40 seconds. Then the third tank in the line rolled forward alone. Corteil understood it was bait. He did not fire. The tank advanced to 420 meters and stopped. The turret traversed toward him. Corteil fired before the German gunner aligned. The shot struck the tank's left track and through the tread. The tank slewed sideways. Corteil loaded again and fired into the side armor. The tank stopped moving. Haas said, "That was 3 and the rest would run." The rest did not run. At 14:19, German infantry appeared at the tree line. Corteil counted approximately 60 men. They moved in 2 groups across the open field toward the burning tanks. Haas requested permission to engage with the machine gun mounted on the trail of the AT gun. Corteil said no. The machine gun had no ammunition. It had been stripped 4 days earlier. Haas had not checked. Corteil kept his sight on the tanks. The 4th tank began moving east, flanking right. The 5th and 6th tanks provided covering fire. Shells impacted steadily around Corteil's position. He could not traverse fast enough to engage the flanking tank and remain behind the shield. He told Haas to spot the flanker. Haas leaned around the shield and called the range at 380 meters and closing from the right. Corteil stayed on the two tanks, giving fire. He waited for one to move. Neither moved. The flanking tank reached 320 meters. Haas said they had to displace or die. Corteil said to be quiet. The German infantry reached the disabled tanks and used them for cover. They began firing rifles at the American position. Rounds struck the gun shield and the dirt berm. One round hit the traverse wheel and jammed it completely. Corteil could no longer adjust left or right. He was locked onto the two stationary tanks 450 meters out. The flanking tank was now 290 meters to his right and outside his arc of fire. Haas said the flanker had stopped and was turning its turret. Corteil told Ruiz to pull the gun trail 3 feet right. Ruiz said he couldn't move it alone. Corteil stepped off the gunner's seat and helped him pull. The trail moved 18 inches. It was enough. Corteil returned to the site and saw the flanking tank in his scope. The turret was nearly aligned on him. He fired. The shot struck the turret front and did not penetrate. The tank fired simultaneously. The shell hit the berm 2 feet below the gun and showered them with rock. Corteil loaded and fired again. The second shot struck the same spot. The armor cracked. The third shot went through. The tank burned. At 14:23, Captain Morris appeared at the position. He was on foot. He had run from the secondary line. He told Corteil to fall back immediately. The flanks had collapsed. German forces were moving into the American rear. The gun could not be saved. Corteil did not acknowledge. He was watching the two remaining tanks. They had begun moving forward together. Morris repeated the order. Corteil said he needed 90 more seconds. Morris asked how many he had killed. Corteil said 4. Morris looked at the burning wrecks in the field and said nothing for 3 seconds. Then he said to make it 60 seconds and withdrew. The two remaining panzers advanced side by side at a distance of 40 meters apart. They fired alternately to keep Corteil suppressed. Shells landed every 8 seconds. Corteil could not aim between impacts. He waited until both tanks fired, then raised his head and acquired the left tank. It was 360 meters out. He fired. The shot struck the track assembly and immobilized the tank. The crew did not bail out. The turret continued to traverse. Corteil loaded and fired into the turret side. The tank exploded. The last panzer stopped advancing. It sat at 410 meters and did not move. Corteil watched it through the sight. The German gunner was waiting for him to fire so he could see the muzzle flash and return fire. Corteil did not fire. 30 seconds passed. The German tank began reversing slowly. Corteil tracked it, but did not shoot. At 470 meters, the tank stopped reversing and turned to retreat. The side armor was exposed for 4 seconds. Corteil fired. The shot penetrated below the turret. The tank burned like the others. The German infantry in the field began retreating toward the tree line. Corteil counted 41 men moving west. Haas asked if they should fire the gun at them. Corteil said the gun was for tanks. Ruiz asked what they should do now. Corteil said to pull the breech block and leave the gun. They removed the block with a pry bar and carried it east toward the secondary line. The gun remained on hill 112. Corteil did not look back at it. American forces withdrew from hill 112 at 1540 on July 18, 1944. German forces reoccupied the western slope by 1600. Forward observers reported 6 destroyed Panzer IVs in the field west of the hill. A 7th tank was found abandoned near the tree line with mechanical failure. Cleanup crews counted 34 German dead in the wheat field and around the destroyed tanks. Exact cause of death could not be determined for all casualties. Fire and secondary explosions from the destroyed vehicles were listed as probable causes. Corteil's gun was recovered by German forces and photographed. The photograph shows the gun shield, the jammed traverse wheel, and the breech cavity. The gun was not reused. Corteil reported to Captain Morris at 1620. Morris asked how many rounds he fired. Corteil said 13. Morris wrote the number in his log. He did not ask additional questions. Corteil was reassigned to a replacement crew the following morning. His original crewmates, Haas and Ruiz, were transferred to different units. Corteil did not see them again. He was promoted to corporal on July 25th. The promotion carried no citation. On August 3rd, Corteil's unit was attached to the 4th Armored Division during the breakout from Normandy. He served as a gunner on a tank destroyer. He was wounded by shell fragments near Argentan on August 19th and evacuated to England. He returned to the United States in November 1944. He was discharged in March 1945 with a Purple Heart. He did not receive additional commendations. Corteil returned to Lewiston, Maine in April 1945. He worked at the same textile mill until 1963. He married in 1947. He had 2 children. He did not speak about the war. In 1981, a military historian researching the battle for Hill 112 found Corteil's name in Captain Morris's July 18th log entry. The entry read, PFC Corteil, 57mm AT gun. Position west slope. 6 tanks destroyed. 13 rounds. Held position past ordered withdrawal. Recommend commendation. No commendation was filed. The historian contacted Corteil by mail. Corteil confirmed the account and provided no additional details. He declined to be interviewed. He died in 1998. His obituary did not mention Hill 112. The 57mm gun remained in German possession until Hill 112 was retaken by British forces on August 4, 1944. It was catalogued as destroyed equipment and scrapped. No record exists of its serial number or final disposition.